Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Great. And I'm going to try to jump back and forth between a couple windows. So apologies if things get if I manage to confuse myself. So I'm going to change. I guess we were trying to figure out exactly how to present some of this data. So I'll be changing gears a little bit from the previous lecture, in that what we wanted to do is quickly get to some of the sort of science questions that are motivating us. So I think we'll get back to kind of methods for analyzing networks, but before we got too deep into the methods, I just wanted to kind of motivate maybe some of the work. And we've had a chance to talk about the mentorship network data already in a couple situations. So to some degree, I'll be reviewing some discussions that we already had. I would hopefully just give you a little bit more of a flavor of the data that's available in the mentorship data set. So let's see, did the slide just advance? Sometimes my screen freezes. There's a new slide on the screen now. Okay, great. Yeah. Sorry. I thought I've gotten like 10 minutes into a talk and then learned that like everyone's still staring at the title slide. So right. Okay. So I don't think I need to motivate this group particularly about the again, this example network, which is the academic mentorship network. Again, what has kind of motivated my own work is this idea that in science, you spend quite a bit of time, right? Like a large fraction of your life training with a very small number of people. And just based on that observation, there's a sense that this is a very important element of kind of how science works. And so, kind of the real question here is just, well, what exactly does mentorship mean as far as sort of personal career development in terms of kind of social networking, but then also kind of how larger scientific fields develop. So I think it's interesting even from a very practical point of view, in addition to these basic questions. This is, again, you've probably, if you've looked at the data sets a little bit, you've already seen what sort of information we have available in the data that we're sharing today. There's this idea of we call it genealogy. We have this kind of analogy with family trees, where we have a database which is basically a very large network graph of mentors and trainees, a directed graph that tracks this across a number of different fields. What we've been doing more recently, and this is work with Daniel and his group, is linking this data that I'll talk about a little bit more about how we collect it to publication data. And initially it was PubMed because the work started in neuroscience, but more recently we've expanded to account for kind of across fields, cross disciplines with the MAG data set. We've also been linking it to at least in the United States, to funding data from the NIH and NSF. We've hand labeled some awards, for instance, Nobel Prize and Howard Hughes funding. And just kind of embedded in it, of course, is geographic information. So we have geo data for different institutions that people are affiliated with. And I'll talk a little bit about this idea of demographics, being able to apply demographic labels to individuals in the data set. So again, I'll just a moment to advertise this project. So this is something that started several years ago. The academic family tree, it started off as a website focused on neuroscience, but there was a lot of interest from other fields in this work. So we ended up launching, oops, sorry. Let's make my window smaller. This is me being clumsy again. Okay, so sorry, can you see a web browser window now? So there's this website that's live. I would encourage you to visit it if you haven't already visited it. I would encourage you to add yourself if you haven't already added yourself. But this is a crowdsourced database where you can search for our favorite neuroscientist. This guy, Conrad Cording, some of you may be familiar with him for his work in a number of different areas, including science of science. And so this is all, a lot of this data has been contributed by users, and you can browse. I noticed You guys might remember some reference to the work of Josh Tenenbaum yesterday. If you're interested, like, why did Daniel mention this guy, Josh Tenenbaum? Well, if it turns out, if you search for Josh and find a connection, you might find out that, hey, okay, it turns out that Daniel worked for Conrad Cording, who worked for Josh Tenenbaum. So maybe it's not crazy that Daniel would have brought this example into his lecture. So anyways, this is just, I think, again, it's a very interesting database to browse. We, as I mentioned, we've been aggregating data from a number of different places. You can look at individual people's profiles. You can, in as much as the record linkage is taken care of, you can look at publications, and you can link to the publications. But of course, from my point of view, this is a beautiful website, and it's fun to play with, but it's also a way to collect data, right? So the secret purpose of this kind of helpful resource is to get users to add information, and then we can collect a nice data set that we can then use to study some of these questions that we're interested in. And so, sorry, let me get this back up. Okay, I'm just going to leave this as a full screen again. Okay, so anyway, so yeah, you can wander the tree. Again, it's a directed graph, so this is an idea that I think is pretty clear from the previous lecture. So I just lost a window. Well, let's keep going. I just lost my video. I can't see anyone, so now I'm. There you guys are. Let's put you up there. Now we're back. Okay. Well, anyways, you're going to have to shout because I can't see you. I'm just, it's really bothering myself. This is my Mac being annoying. Let's try this. I apologize for this. It's just all right. It's just if I start playing the slides, Zoom disappears. And, okay. Oh. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we have this directed network, which can capture, again, this idea of kind of a node in the network, which is a trainee, and then in science in particular, you often have multiple relationships. So there can be, say, a graduate mentor and a postdoctoral mentor who are both going to kind of play a role in this network. And so we've been, just kind of thinking back to some of those kind of very basic network statistics that Xing was mentioning, we can think about how to apply those metrics to the data. For instance, we can talk about path length. So for instance, one thing that's been interesting is, well, how related are these two mentors? For instance, how far back in time do you have to go to a common ancestor? You can also think about things like degree. For instance, how many trainees does a mentor have is often considered a measure of success. And so we can apply these kind of very fundamental tools to this data set. So here's just some slides. So if you want to download them, you can, obviously browsing the site is a more interesting way to look at it. As far as the publications, we initially used TF-IDF-based analysis to just generate vector embeddings of individual publications using pretty basic NLP type analysis. More recently, we've been playing with Spectre embeddings, and those are available on the website. But same basic idea, right? You're generating a big vector of numbers that classifies or characterizes the semantic content of a paper. Just in the stuff I'm presenting today, relatively quickly, we measure cosine similarity between either individual papers or the average embedding of researchers. And for reasons I don't need to get into, we scale it 0 to 10. So basically, the cosine similarity is typically 0 to 1. We just scaled it by 10 for somewhat arbitrary reasons. And like I said, we're looking at different ways to characterize the semantic content of the publications. We also have funding data, which again you can browse. And we've also been looking at how we can just infer demographic data. So gender, we found, has been pretty successful using this algorithm that genderize, which is basically just using first name to kind of assign a probability to a gender. Race, I'd say we have a little bit more mixed success. I'd be happy to talk about this more. So some groups are pretty easy to identify based on their names, but less so others. Again, age is something we haven't really spent a lot of time with, but except more to just kind of look at that seniority kind of professionally. Okay, and this idea of success is, again, I get frustrated with the idea that that's kind of the purpose of studying mentorship, but it is kind of a convenient way to look at it, right? And obviously as researchers, we're interested in succeeding, so we have kind of a personal interest in it, and we've basically just taken the intuitive idea of what it means to be successful, and in the extreme case, you can get you can win a Nobel Prize and be very kind of prestigious, but also kind of at an intermediate level, just you can measure success by a trainee achieving a faculty position. And so quantification we used in some initial work is just this distinction between entries in the tree who have 0 trainees versus those who have more than 1 or more than 0 trainees. Again, this is just showing kind of the data that's available in the database. We have a lot of the sort of width of these bars indicates how large the data set is for that particular field, and the sort of plotting the proliferation rate, which is kind of average number of trainees per node in that particular tree. And so one question is just, is this distribution of proliferation rates meaningful? And it does, if you look at sort of fields that are more established like chemistry, people tend to continue much less frequently than fields like neuroscience. And just to kind of get a sense of the kinds of things you can look at, well, here, this is an analysis of degree, right? Where we've basically looked, it's a directional degree. So we're looking at the number of nodes, kind of pointing downward towards trainees in the graph. And we're comparing people who are classified as mentors. Those are people who have trainees versus just all entries in the tree. And what you see is that you get a very similar distribution of proliferation rates of degrees, except that with trainees, there's this very large bar at 0, indicating that there are a lot of trainees that don't continue to become independent researchers themselves. And again, just to kind of talk about the semantic relationship here, we're measuring average similarity or cosine distance, right? So I guess it's 1 minus cosine distance in this case. So a higher number means more similar publications. And we find two mentors, so a postdoc and a graduate mentor, are likely to have much more similar research than two random nodes in the tree. Okay, so the question is, can we use this to kind of learn something about kind of how the structure of someone's mentoring, kind of who their mentors are, how does that impact their likelihood of success? So we looked at the data in a little bit more detail, and so what we're asking here is, let's just take trainees and look at the properties of mentors of either trainees who continued on in research or those who didn't continue in research. And you get these two histograms. Obviously, they're overlapping, but what you see is that for the ones that don't continue, they tend to be a little bit less similar to their mentors' research than those that do continue. So again, the sort of blue edge shows that there's kind of a significant shift towards being more similar to your graduate mentors' research than not. And the same is true for postdoc mentors. So if you continue doing work similar to your postdoc mentor, that's also a predictor of continuation. And you can say which is more important. It turns out that weighting towards your postdoc advisor has a bigger effect on whether you're likely to continue. But again, but both postdoctoral and graduate mentors are important. And what was kind of again, this is work that's published, but just again to kind of illustrate how you can use these relatively simple network analyses to kind of make inferences about the graph. What we also finally found was that when your mentors were dissimilar in terms of their publications, so if your graduate and postdoctoral mentors had low similarity, that was actually a predictor of success. And so again, we modeled it, and so this is just showing the results of a relatively simple model. This is not a deep neural network. This is basically linear regression with a few extra bells and whistles to account for the fact that there's a large number of kind of trainees that don't end up having mentors, and we could figure out all these different how much these factors impact the likelihood of continuation, and also look at if you do continue, how many trainees you're likely to have. And we found a few things that are consistent with what people have observed previously. Sorry, I'm seeing a question. Soon for those from all over the world. Mostly United States, but it is international. So I mean, there are representations from different countries, and it's a little bit, again, since it's crowdsourced, we're getting you get sampling that sort of depends on users. However, there's a large set of mentoring relationships that we've extracted from ProQuest for the United States. So we have pretty dense representation in the United States. So again, just to kind of state sort of perhaps the obvious, this is replicating a result that basically it's harder to get a job now than it was in previous years. So as time passes, the likelihood of continuation has been decreasing. This is again showing that both your graduate and your postdoctoral mentors, if they have a large number of trainees, they're likely to have, you're more likely to succeed. So this is the rich getting richer result. And this was the new observation that we made in this particular study, which is that if your mentors have low similarity in their own semantic output, but you maintain similarity with those mentors, then that's a predictor of success. There were some effects on the size of the trainees' labs as well, but those were not as striking as the continuation results. But basically, just again to kind of summarize the result very quickly, there was this idea that the successful trainees, what they were doing was managing to link a graduate and postdoctoral sort of research program into a unique program that was filling in a gap between them, right? So you're maintaining connections to both mentors, but those mentors themselves don't have a very strong connection. And that was what we could observe in this analysis. I'm not doing time-wise. So anyway, so I just wanted to mention people did the work. Daniel was instrumental in this work, and Jean Léonard is now off doing data science for the French government, and Titipat is a really talented data scientist, I guess, who also has recently set up his own lab in Singapore. So again, just to kind of, I think interesting to me, not this I mentioned, but this that network.
I think we lost Stephen. Check. Yes, I think we lost him. So
he's back.
I'm back.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. How many minutes ago did I disappear?
It was like 10, 15 seconds.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So anyways, okay. So again, just to kind of motivate a couple questions, I think that may be of interest and have already come up in some of our discussions. This idea that mentorship network reciprocates semantic network somehow, right? So if we take two mentors, and I guess so what we were doing here was measuring a common ancestor distance between mentors. So we're essentially taking out the trainee and then saying, well, how far back in time do we have to go to find a path between two mentors? And what we found is that mentors that were more similar, closer in the network, tended to have more similar publications. But also, there was stuff that was captured about the mentors that wasn't reflected in just random pairs. So we could take two random pairs, see how far apart they were in the network. Again, you see this relationship, but it sort of falls in a different scale. So what that's saying is that the sort of mentorship network captures something about the science of the researchers, but there's a little bit more going on in the sense that two mentors who are chosen by a trainee are likely to be more related, even with the same kind of distance in the network. So another question that we've been getting interested in more recently is this question, the idea of how gender relates to these issues. Just again, unsurprisingly, probably to most of you here, there have been a lot of Nobel Prizes awarded. Kind of over 100 in the past century. So men have gotten 150 Nobel Prizes. How many have women gotten? Well, so in the last 2 decades, men have gotten 150 Nobel Prizes, women have gotten 19. So there's definitely an imbalance. If the idea is that equity is a worthwhile goal, that there's definitely work to be done in understanding why there is such a strong imbalance. And we've been looking at this idea of the leaky pipeline, where again there's a lot going on here, but just to kind of give you a sense of what we can look at, if we label the data and label the names use the names to label the gender of trainees, what we can compare is on the x-axis for different fields the gender ratio of mentors, and on the y-axis the gender ratio of trainees. And so what you see pretty clearly is that there in many fields there's actually greater than 50% gender ratio. So it's not that there aren't necessarily women engaging in science, but clearly there's a big drop off by the time you get to mentors, and mentors are very nearly under 50%. There's also quite a bit of spread between fields. So things like math and physics are down here, unsurprisingly. Things like biology, neuroscience, and nursing are up here. So there are very distinct disparities between fields as well. We've been doing some work on this. I'll Leah, who's part of the course here, has a preprint that's kind of digging into this question a little bit deeper. Let's see, and I think, oh, sorry, this is just a random extra slide. So how am I doing time-wise? Questions about?
Are those slides in the repo?
Yeah, there's a PDF. Sorry, and I apologize for not following the RISE standard, but there, so there's a PDF that has that.
No problem.
So if we go into today's lectures, you'll see there's a notebook that gives you a little bit of an introduction to the mentorship data. There's also a kind of more general resource that shows how to load some of this data. Yeah. Oh, and there is an STS tree, I think. So anyways, yeah, so if you want to load this notebook, I just made a copy of it because I'm trying not to screw up my Git repo. This is mostly just to kind of help you get oriented to the data. So for those of you who haven't already looked, right, we have this data set repository, and we have a bunch of CSV files, which are more or less dumps from the or snapshots from the NeuroTree database or the academic tree database. And if you run this, I'm just pulling out. Uh-oh. Okay, let's try this again. So there are a number of fields, columns in these tables. I'm just pulling out a couple. And this notebook will sort of provide a little bit of information about how to interpret everything. I think it's relatively intuitive. But for instance, if you load the connection table, again, it's a directed graph. So we have the unique identifier, and then we have these IDs. In this case, they're called Mentee ID and Mentor ID. These are unique identifiers for the nodes. You can think of these exactly as nodes that might go into a network X graph. We also have this mentorship type. So whether it's one would be a graduate student, two would be a postdoc. We have institutional information, and in some cases, many cases, we have information about the year that the training was completed, so graduation date. Similarly, we can look at people, and we find things like first name, last name, again, their current institutional affiliation, and then they can be associated with one or more trees, right? So we see, in this case, neuroscience or neuroscience and psychology. If we want to just kind of merge those two tables into one table, here's my probably inelegant but effective pandas merge, where now I have again the trainee and the mentor IDs, and then the names, their names. So here's the name of the trainee, here's the name of the mentor. So again, just to kind of illustrate that you can do stuff with this, I'm going to extract the connection matrix. So this is trainee node, mentor node, the type of relationship, and oops, connections. There we go. So this is going to be a big numpy matrix, and this is just digested into a form that makes it easy to run some code. So it's just a very large, this is all the connections and 3 columns to kind of characterize the type of who's being connected and the type of connection. This is I apologize, as a former MATLAB user, this is a MATLAB function that's been converted into a Python function, but basically given one node ID traces the distance to either one node or to a number of different nodes. I'm just going to define it, invite you to browse it if you want to. There's also a function here that's computing a path, right? So this is, again, probably very easy to implement in Network X or something, but this is going to just compute a path between 2 people. And so here, for instance, this is a mentor and trainee who are related directly. So there's a very simple path that takes one step, but we can also see the direction of the step and the total distance. I can just make a nice display function. Okay, so we can see, for instance, that this relationship was a graduate student relationship. But say we actually want to use this database to find something about someone new. I can search for someone. So Eric Kandel is a sort of very well-established neuroscientist who studies synapses. So I can find his node just by searching using, again, this is a very dumb string match. But now I want to find a connection between Jack Gallant, this other mentor, and Eric Kandel. So now I can plug them into the mentorship path function, and I get a little bit longer path out, right? So you have to go 3 steps, and you kind of zigzag up and down. And we want to turn this into a human language. We can say, okay, Jack Gallant trained with Joy Hirsch trained Amit Etkin trained with Eric Kandel. So again, obviously you might want to plot this in a graphical form, but just to kind of let you know that this information is available. Again, I mentioned this idea of directionality. So one thing we might be interested in is tracing out the path through a common ancestor rather than just the shortest path in the network. So here it's a little bit longer now because we have to go back several steps and then down a step. We can look at this path and see that, okay, so Jack Gallant trained with David Van Essen trained with Hubel trained with Kufler, and then Kufler trained Eric Kandel. So we go up 3 steps and then down 1 to get from someone else. Okay, and how am I doing this? We're okay time-wise. So I just had a couple exercises here, which I guess we could you're welcome to work on now. We're basically just implementing some of the using some of the functions that I already went through, just to kind of look at some other nodes in the network. Let's okay. Yes. So Kandel is known. Okay, so question, is the PID the author ID in MAG? No. And this is actually an issue. PID is a unique ID that we generated in academic tree. What we have done, as well as we have done the linkage. So if you look in the mentorship data set, and if you look actually in the demo notebook that's in references in SOS Hub, you'll see where you can get that linkage information. Just to kind of point out, this is the reality of our field. There's not a one-to-one mapping, right? There are cases where multiple sort of MAG authors are actually the same person. And there are probably cases in the academic tree where one MAG author is multiple entities in the tree. And the challenge, of course, is what's the ground truth, right? So we believe in reality that there's only one Daniel Acuna, and but sometimes you think there might be 4, right? And that's something that we're trying to I think we've done a decent job with the disambiguation, but the point being that it's sort of pick your poison. You got to pick some unique identifier. We've got the unique identifier, which at least has been validated by users in some cases. But again, the MAG identifiers could also work. In general, though, it's actually not that problematic, right? I mean, the majority of matches are one-to-one, so you can translate pretty easily. So I see Jody had a suggestion about dissertations. That is great, and like I said, we got a large chunk of ProQuest data, which covered U.S. dissertations from I think 2000 to 2015. But yeah, it's always great to see if we can get more more data sets. And I think there's some questions early on about validation and kind of, can you trust crowdsourced data? And again, this is something I think where if you want to kind of publish with it, you need to just design your analyses to control for those factors, right? I mean, we emphasize accuracy, so we try not to have what you might call a false positive error. but obviously there's missing data. And so any analysis you consider, you want to make sure that there's a possibility that you're missing some number of trainees or mentors and connections in the network. Yeah. And so ProQuest ProQuest is quite good for the United States and I guess Canada. We had a dissertation or database of French dissertations. My understanding is that many countries have their own databases, and this is really just a time effort issue. So I have a large appetite for data. I love getting new data. So if there are any data sets that you're aware of, I would love to know about them and start playing with them. So great, yeah. So if we can get it from the German library, and again, it's mostly just a matter of time and effort to get the data incorporated. And of course, it's not trivial, right? Because often what happens is we've got kind of half coverage of people, and names are sometimes misspelled, and institutional affiliations are sometimes out of date. And so kind of unambiguously importing a large number of people isn't trivial, as many of you probably know from having dealt with this type of data set. Yes, so okay, Robbie asks when you match the ProQuest data. So there was a little bit of a complicated situation. So we have little subnetworks, right? Each ProQuest record is a 2-node network of the mentor and the trainee. So we imported a large number of those that you might think of as kind of orphaned networks. But if there was no kind of ambiguity about name matching with other nodes in the tree, right? There are a lot of mentors named John Smith, and whether the John Smith in ProQuest is the one that's already in the database is a challenging question. But in cases where it was clear that this was a new node, we've imported them. And where the nodes already existed, we were confident, we labeled them as we pulled in the extra ProQuest information about the dissertation. But then there are a number where we just weren't sure, and that data is available, kind of not linked formally into the database, but we kind of have that kind of partially linked, with the hope that eventually we can kind of go through and continue disambiguating these kind of, whether John Smith number 17 is the same or different than John Smith's 1 through 16, and so but that's trying to think. There were several 100,000 dissertations, and I think probably the majority of them are in there. It's probably about 70% of them are in the academic tree now. Yeah, so that's great. So if anyone has, I'm seeing several different links to databases of dissertations. I'm aware of some of them, but not all of them. And if you actually just could, I would love to get links to them. So if you can point me to them, that would be great. I'll try to follow up on what I'm seeing in the chat as well.